All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to another video. Lately, I've been going in on right-wingers a little bit, so I decided to go after a left-winger today. We have Parker here on Jubilee. And throughout, if you haven't seen this debate, it's between Andrew Wilson, Jay Dyer, Parker Get a Job, and Danny Phil Talk. And they go over a wide array of topics. And on many of them, I think that Parker specifically comes off as dishonest and sort of just sloppy, unprepared. But perhaps none better elucidate this than his attempted defense of the introduction of transgender women into cisgendered women's sports. So without further ado, we'll get into the video. We'll hear a little bit about what he has to say. It's not a super long video. I think I'll let it speak for itself. Let's get into it.
The trans lobby has tried to do it by eroding women's rights in things like women's sport. That has exposed so many trans people to mockery, abuse, and the rest of it. And I would say that rather than spending all this time and effort and money on flags in Pride Month, what about just actually getting people together to understand that eroding women's rights is the worst possible thing to promote trans rights?
So before we get into it, I'll just say this. I don't think that the whole transgenders and cisgender sports debate is hugely impactful. I mean, maybe I'm speaking, in a biased manner here because I'm not that into sports, but it's not extremely pressing. But I do think we can, learn something by paying attention to this argument, because I think that this is a case where the left is just clearly, I think, wrong. I think that if you are pushing for, the introduction of transgender people into cisgender sports, I think you have to recognize the fact that these individuals will retain an advantage whenever you're talking about, male to female transitioners. Sorry, I'm a little bit gassy. I always record these videos after eating. I don't know why. But they will retain an advantage, obviously. I mean, number one, there is research that has gone into the subject, and it's pretty clear that there are long-term advantages, at least 4 years out. That's as far as some of these studies will look, 3-4 years out, to, being born male. Going through hormone replacement therapy, suppressing your testosterone, these things do lead to decreases in lean body mass and stuff, but it's not decreases that would equalize them with women. You can even take like height, for example. If you are a person who went through male puberty and you are now 6'3", no amount of hormone replacement therapy is going to make you 5'7" or 5'5", whatever you would need to be on par with the average female athlete. And are we going to pretend that that is the only advantage that men have? No, of course not. We have more lean body mass, denser bones, larger frames. We are stronger, bigger lung capacity, greater lung capacity rather. And so are we going to pretend that all of these advantages are equalized except for height? Obviously not. And the research is there to support this claim. And so if you are advocating for the introduction of transgenders into cisgender sports, you are advocating for, you are advocating for something that will infringe upon cisgendered women's right to, we'll say right, we're using it loosely here, obviously, to participate in sports. And that's something you will have to own. But the left doesn't seem to want to back off of this position. And I think that it's the left's unwillingness to see reason here that, pervades a lot of the sort of, I want to say, nonsensical arguments that they push, some of the more fringe ones. I think that they were so used to being right in, other cases, maybe like the case for immigration or something like that, that they carried that confidence over into these topics, but it's unjustified. We need to look at each individual position and assess it on its own merits. But okay, so that's the case that I'm presenting, that obviously there is an advantage, even after years of testosterone suppression or hormone replacement therapy, that transgenders have over cisgendered women. Let's hear Parker's affirmative case for their introduction.
Would you accept that?
Okay, so then if we were going to be talking about eroding women's rights, we'd have to talk about people that, someone like Andrew Wilson supports, like Donald Trump, who is held civilly liable if sexually.
And here we get the dishonesty. Listen, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump. I think that he's an idiot. I think that it's like populist brain rot, the people who support him. But why is that where you're going to answer this question? It just shows the weakness. He is admitting the weakness of his case by doing this. And this is a diversion.
Abusing a woman who bragged about walking in the changing rooms.
Let's stick to my question. Don't bring Trump into it.
I promise you I'm making a point relative to this.
All right.
He bragged
Smoky
about
man
walking
bad. Smoky man bad. Smoky man bad.
You're very childish. He bragged about walking into the changing rooms.
All you can do is focus on me. You can't even answer to his question, dude. He's just.
I'm promising I'm answering it right now. You're cutting me off.
But Smoky man bad.
You're cutting me off. I'm trying to answer it right now. Respectfully, I'm trying to answer it right now, but you're not allowing me to.
Okay, well, answer without distracting into Trump and stuff. Just answer the question.
Well, I'm giving an explanation, right? So he bragged about walking into the changing rooms of girls in Miss USA because he quote unquote owns the place to inspect them without
forget Trump. Forget Trump.
I promise you, I'm making a point here. Would you let me?
You have to get to the point a bit quicker. Come on.
I promise you I am. I've had 15 seconds. Okay, so specifically, right, people like Andrew Wilson do not call that type of stuff out when it's explicitly harmful towards women's rights.
You're playing whataboutery. I'm more interested in whataboutery. Because I haven't done that. So as somebody like me, talk to me, Parker, talk to me, right? As somebody who is...
He's having to like rein Parker in. Parker is obsessed with like, figures like Andrew Wilson or Donald Trump. I don't like Donald Trump. I do want to make that clear. But this obsession with these figures, it is unbecoming to say the least. I mean, like, just answer the question. This is not a good look. And the fact that he's having to be reined in, it just doesn't look good. And I think it speaks to the dishonesty that, underlies a lot of his argumentation.
Always supported.
I was going to refer to trans
someone
people,
who's always supported
trans
rights, trans
this
people's
is incredibly
rights.
Disingenuous.
Well, I have always supported trans people's rights to fairness, equality, and safety, right to the point that it began to erode into women.
And I will say this: I used to think like I've never been a Parker fan. I don't watch his debates or anything like that, but I thought that he was somewhat competent. I thought that he was a decent debater. But his showing here, I watched this when I was at work. I mean, it was very bad, and he is a little bit of a spaz. He kind of can't contain himself. Like even here, he's like shaking his head, and I don't know. It's odd. I guess my conception of Parker does not align with what actually exists. Perhaps I should have looked into him more before I formed an opinion.
Women's rights to the same thing, and that's my point to you. Why waste all this time, effort, and money on virtue signaling for Pride Month when in fact there's a real problem going on which remains unresolved because too many people on the left and too many young people go along with this absolute farce of trans athletes in women's sport, which exposes trans people around the world to extra mockery and abuse.
But you'll condemn the mockery and abuse from people like Jay Dyer, and these are the mockers.
Is that homonym?
You condemn that.
Well, I'm saying you're going to get the mockery when there is something so obviously grotesquely unfair.
Can I respond?
Parker, you got your hand up very politely, so answer me without mentioning Donald Trump or Andrew Wilson.
Yeah, okay. So I can't mention the person on the panel, but specifically in terms of trans people are not specifically going to be harmful towards women in these particular spaces, given that they've met the conditions of multiple years of HRT.
Have you been
like that? That is just not true. So they won't be harmful to cisgendered women in these spaces, given that they've met the condition of multiple years of HRT. That is false, and it is contradicted by the data. They do retain advantages relative to the cisgendered women, and as such, if they are introduced, they will harm, under the typical definition of harm, the cisgendered women's ability to compete in those sports, thereby harming them. So that is a false argument, based not on data, but on a preconceived conclusion. And, it's remarkable that he holds this position. It makes me question every other position that he has if he's willing to take this position right here. In what I can only conceive as a dishonest manner, because this is a position right now that's been, that he is espousing, this position has been exposed time after time after time. It's one of the positions that makes the left look bad. And so he knows that what he's saying is not true, and yet he adheres to it. That's dishonest.
Okay, have you been? Okay, sorry. Hang on.
Please, let me finish.
No, Parker, you can't make it.
Parker.
Literally, as you've said this today, it's been revealed.
I'm finishing, Piers.
Today,
Piers, I'm trying to
wait
explain.
a minute.
I'm trying to explain, Piers.
You talked about safety.
This is
Literally today, the Algerian gold medal winner in the Paris Olympics women's boxing has been revealed to be a man who should never have been competing.
Piers, can I speak?
That's
Piers,
why.
You know how people feel when they're on your panels and you mute them,
Can I speak without interruption, please?
All right, answer.
I've been incredibly nice on this panel. I would love to be able to speak without interruption. Is that okay, Piers?
Yes, but answer my question.
Now, I will say this: Piers using like a one-off example isn't actually establishing his case. I wish he had, maybe a reference to some of the surveys that have been done. But nevertheless, it is true that they do retain advantages. So, and I mean, we know this everywhere else. For example, by the way, some of this is just prima facie. Like, obviously, like the height one, for example, that I brought up, you don't become shorter as a result of going on to HRT. But also, we know this in other areas. For example, if we know that there's research that has been done that's shown if you take anabolic steroids, you retain advantages as a result of those steroids for years, maybe forever, but at least for 4 years is the research that I've seen that directly benefit you. And it's why you can't do a cycle, get off of steroids, and then go compete in a sport. You have to wait until, such time as they deem it not, extremely competitively advantageous. Nevertheless, it might be the case that even waiting those years, as the research shows, doesn't get rid of all of the advantages. And as such, maybe we should consider, lifetime bans for people who have done steroids. But either way, that is an area where the introduction of exogenous substances leads to advantages that are retained even after those substances are discontinued. Now, what do we think is stronger, male puberty or the introduction of some substance? Obviously, male puberty is going to be stronger. It's going to have a greater influence, than doing like some small test cycle or something. But I guess we want to pretend that, steroids are something completely different, and, that just doesn't make any sense, though.
Yeah, I was trying to answer the question. You cut me off. So specifically, I don't think trans people in these spaces would be harmful after multiple years of HRT and or not going through a male puberty, as I've seen no good evidence.
And or, that's actually important. And or not going through, you're going to have to clarify that. Now, if you say multiple years of HRT and not going through male puberty, then you may be able to make your case. If you say, you transitioned before you ever went through puberty and you are on HRT, but the vast majority of transgender athletes and transgender people did not transition prior to puberty. So that's not the case you want to take. That's why he says and or, by the way, because he doesn't want it to be conjunctive. He is fine with them going through male puberty and then going on HRT and suppressing their testosterone and stuff like that. But that actually doesn't eradicate the differences. So that and or is doing all of the work there, and that's dishonest.
From any scientific studies that indicate that there would be an unfair biological advantage at that point.
What are you talking about, man?
Listen, I'm still explaining.
Parker, you're talking complete gibberish,
man. Can I please finish?
Imam Khalif has literally just been exposed as a biological male who won Olympic gold in women's boxing and beat up an Italian woman, so badly she quit in 43 seconds and said she thought she was going to die in the ring. So the whole argument...
Again, I do just want to, in the sake of being bipartisan, this doesn't build your case. I mean, we could conceive of a world in which there were two equal groups and still someone from this novel equal group dominated the sport. It doesn't speak to an inherent advantage of that group. So, this isn't great reasoning, but...
You just put forward is literally disproved by a news story today. That's the point I was making to you. Of course it's dangerous. When you allow biological men to get in a boxing ring and beat up women, it is dangerous.
But that is true, yes. When you allow biological men who have undergone a transition into the ring with cisgendered women, you are endangering those cisgendered women, obviously. At least relative to the amount of danger, because it's also dangerous to let a cisgender woman in the ring with another cisgender woman. But obviously we're saying that it's more dangerous on average to let them in with a, transgender woman.
Piers, has that person been through multiple years of HRT?
I don't know. I don't care.
Then they haven't met my set of criteria. So how is that a critique of my worldview if they haven't met the set of criteria that I mentioned? Can I please finish? Can I please mention? Right. So again, let me please finish. Right. I am saying if they meet this set of criteria, then they can play, and there's nothing unfair biologically.
And Jay Dyer is right here. It is arbitrary because it isn't backed up by the data. You're just setting some 3 years, 2 years. He said a few years, so 3 years on HRT and testosterone suppression, and then you can compete. But yeah, that is completely arbitrary if it's disconnected from the data. Why? What do you expect to be different substantially between the person prior to and after that condition has been met? You know, I'm not saying that the person won't have less muscle mass than before and won't, you know, maybe experience other decreases in their qualities such that they are more on par with women, with cisgendered women, that is. But they're not going to be equal. Obviously.
This is where you're so deluded. You're so deluded because even if you have all the treatment, you still retain the body mass, the muscle mass, the lung capacity. You retain all the biological advantages of being born.
That's not true. You don't retain all of them, but you retain a lot of it.
Multiple years of HRT. Not after multiple years of HRT.
Yes, you do.
Wait, do you want to bet, Piers? Piers, put money on it. You said you.
Okay, so let's hear. This is important. What is he wanting to bet on? What is Parker's claim?
Retain every biological advantage.
Muscle mass.
Let's hear that again.
HRT.
Yes, you do.
Wait, do you want to bet, Piers? Piers, put money on it. You said you retain every biological advantage.
Muscle.
That is a completely indefensible claim. Every biological advantage? No one would claim. Now, I think Piers did just say something like that, but clearly it's a misspeak. No one would literally claim that you retain every single biological advantage. You don't have to retain every biological advantage. Parker knows this. The argument is that you retain enough to be sufficiently advantaged such that it is unfair. So you don't have to retain every advantage. That's a dishonest framing.
Given that you have gone through multiple years of HRT.
Capacity.
You don't think muscle mass
you want to bet your
entire
savings of your entire life
let's
that I'm right
Piers,
and you're wrong?
Piers, let's bet $1,000 right now that there are lower biological advantages that would specifically exist.
He just admitted that there's still advantages. Lower biological advantages that would still exist.
Given that someone goes through multiple years of HRT.
Given that someone goes through multiple years of HRT. So you are literally, by your own statement, admitting that there are still biological advantages. And yet you are okay with allowing them to be introduced into these sports. And to throw off the equilibrium of competition that is established whenever you have people who belong to a group competing in a sport. How is this guy taken serious?
HRT, right, relative to estrogen.
No, you're missing my point.
Take that bet.
No, you're missing my point.
Are you going to accept the bet? Yes or no?
You can have all the H.
And this is just rhetoric. Are you going to accept the bet? The bet that's based on what? Like a completely absurd position? The bet that every single advantage is not retained. Yeah, I don't think many people are going to disagree with you there. If you shoot yourself up full of estrogen and suppress your testosterone, you will lose body mass. You will lose lean body mass. Duh.
HRT treatment you like.
Piers.
You can have all the testosterone, but hang
He's not
on.
Gonna accept it.
Let me answer. I'll tell you the bet I'll make. If you want to bet the $1,000, if you want to bet the $1,000 that if you go through testosterone reduction treatment and the rest of it, that you come out of it with a reduced muscle mass or lung capacity or the other things that give men an advantage, take that bet for me.
Sorry, I zoned out. What did he say?
That you come out of it with if you go through testosterone reduction treatment and the rest of it, that you come out of it with a reduced muscle mass or lung capacity or the other things that give men an advantage. Take that bet for me.
Yeah. So I will bet after multiple years of HRT.
I don't even know what he's saying. Parker would agree with that.
Specifically relating to estrogen, right? There is a reduction in muscle mass. You want to take that bet, Piers?
No, it's bullshit. Andrew Wilson.
Okay.
By the way, if Piers actually thinks that there isn't a reduction in lean body mass, because it sounds like he's actually doubling down on that, which that is absurd. And this is sort of what I mean by like the left and the right are both just kind of stupid. Obvious, like what? Piers, come on. If you shoot yourself up full of estrogen and suppress your testosterone, you will experience a decrease in lean body mass. Obviously. Are you going to say that you wouldn't? And so, actually maybe Parker was right to, establish that bet, because it sounds like Piers actually believes that, which that doesn't go to make Parker's position look any better, but it certainly makes Piers look pretty bad. But that's that. They, after this, they go on and talk more about pride and stuff like that. I just wanted to highlight Parker's defense of this really indefensible position. And, if you're curious, like here, let me pull something up. So this is literally just the Wikipedia entry on transgendered women in sports. And we can read a little bit from here. A 2021 literature review concluded that for trans women, even with testosterone suppression, the data show that strength, lean body mass, muscle size, and bone density are only trivially affected. The reductions observed in muscle mass, size, and strength are very small compared to the baseline differences between males and females in these variables, and thus there are major performance and safety implications in sports where these attributes are competitively significant. After 24 months of testosterone suppression, bone mass is generally preserved. Okay, 24, that's 2 years of testosterone suppression. Bone mass is generally preserved. The review states that no study has reported muscle loss greater than 12%. No study has reported muscle loss greater than 12% with testosterone suppression, even after 3 years of hormone therapy. 12%. Do we think that the average woman only has 12% less muscle than a man? It found that trans women are in the top 10% of females regarding lean body mass and possess a grip 25% stronger than most females. Going on, a 2021 systematic review found that significant decreases in measures of strength, lean body mass, and muscle area were observed after 12 months of hormone therapy, so there are significant decreases, while the values remained above those observed in cisgender women even after 36 months, suggesting that, suggesting that trans women, quote, may retain strength advantages over cisgendered women. So that's 3 years. That's Parker's cutoff. So it's clear that his idea is just completely falsified by the existing data. They do retain advantages even 3 years out. And this is with regard to things like lean body mass, grip strength, bone mass. And so I don't really know where he's getting this idea from, but it's clearly wrong. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Check out my Twitter, check out my Substack. Leave a comment. Blah, blah, blah. You get it. Okay, bye.